No. Out. We don't seat animals.
I just want a table. I've been here before.
And I'm telling you right now, whatever hole you crawled out of this morning, crawl back. You smell like the street.
Her voice cracked.
I just went for a run, that's all. I just want breakfast.
And find a dumpster. I hear they're generous.
A white couple walked in behind
Welcome.
her. Tank top, basketball shorts.
Right this way, folks.
Same clothes, same restaurant. You know exactly what you're doing.
He leaned in, grinning.
Yeah, I do.
He snapped his fingers.
Security. Drag her out if you have to.
She didn't scream, didn't cry. She made one phone call. And the man who called her an animal,
I have the location.
he had no idea what was coming. The Belmont opened at 8 on Saturdays. White tablecloths, jazz playing low through ceiling speakers. The kind of place where water came in glass bottles and nobody asked the price. Andrea Wells walked in at 8:15. Gray hoodie, black leggings, running shoes still damp from 6 miles through Riverside Park. Her hair pulled back, no makeup, no jewelry. Just a woman who wanted eggs and coffee after a long run. The hostess smiled. "Good morning. Table for one?" "Please." She reached for a menu, started walking toward a window booth. Then Greg Thornton appeared. He came from behind the bar like he owned the air between the walls. Navy suit, gold cufflinks, a pocket square folded into a shape that probably had a name. He looked at Andrea the way someone looks at a stain on new carpet. "Stop." The hostess froze. Greg positioned himself between Andrea and the dining room, arms crossed, chin up. "Ma'am, I already told you at the door. We have standards here." "I didn't speak to you at the door." "You didn't need to. I could smell you from across the room." Two women at a nearby table looked up from their mimosas. One nudged the other. Neither said a word. "I'd like a table," Andrea said. "I'll be 20 minutes. Eggs and coffee." "And I'd like you to leave, but here we are." Greg smiled, the kind of smile that isn't a smile at all. This establishment serves a certain clientele. You are not it. I don't know how else to explain that to you. "Try." His jaw tightened. He wasn't used to being challenged, not by someone who looked like her. "Fine. You want me to spell it out?" "You walked in here looking like you just crawled off somebody's porch. You're dripping sweat on my hardwood floors. You're wearing a hoodie that probably cost less than our breadbasket, and you want me to sit you next to people who pay $200 a plate?" He shook his head slowly. "No, not today. Not ever." Andrea's chest rose and fell. She swallowed hard, but her voice stayed level. "There are people in this room wearing sneakers right now." "Those people are different." "Different how?" He didn't answer. He didn't need to. They both knew. The front door opened behind her. A couple walked in. White, mid-30s. The man wore cargo shorts and a wrinkled polo. The woman had on yoga pants and slides. Neither had showered. You could tell from 3 feet away. Greg's face transformed, like a light switch. "Good morning. Welcome to the Belmont. I've got a gorgeous table by the garden. Right this way." He walked them past Andrea, close enough that the woman's bag brushed Andrea's arm. Neither the couple nor Greg acknowledged she existed. Andrea watched them sit, watched Greg pull out the woman's chair, watched him pour water from a glass bottle and laugh at something the man said. Same morning, same restaurant, same dress code. Different answer. A busboy near the kitchen saw the whole thing. He looked at Andrea, looked at the floor, said nothing. Andrea stood in the center of the foyer, alone, a black woman in a hoodie, invisible and hypervisible at the same time. Greg walked back, still smiling from his little performance. "Are we done here, or do I need to call someone to help you find the exit? Andrea reached into her hoodie pocket, pulled out her phone, dialed one number. Victoria, I'm at the Belmont. Pull everything on this property. Lease, tenants, compliance, all of it. She hung up, looked at Greg. We're done here. She walked out. Greg laughed, turned to the hostess. Some people just don't know their place. He had no idea how wrong he was. Andrea didn't go far. She stood on the sidewalk outside the Belmont, phone still warm in her hand. The morning sun hit the restaurant's glass facade and bounced back like the building itself was trying to look away. Inside, Greg Thornton was riding high. He straightened his cufflinks, adjusted his pocket square, walked the dining room like a general surveying conquered land. Sorry about that, folks, he said to a table of 4 near the bar. You know how it is. Some people see a nice place and think they can just waltz in. No class. No self-awareness. The man at the table chuckled. His wife looked uncomfortable but said nothing. Greg leaned toward the hostess stand where Sophie, 23, 6 months on the job, $200 away from making rent, was pretending to organize menus. Sophie, if anyone like that comes in again, you come get me before you even think about seating them. Understood? Anyone like what? Greg stared at her, the kind of stare that answers a question without words. Sophie looked down. Yes, sir. Good girl. He patted the hostess stand twice and walked back toward the bar. Sophie's knuckles went white around the edge of a menu. Outside, Andrea hadn't moved. She watched through the glass. She could see Greg laughing with the bartender. She could see Sophie's face, tight, angry, trapped. Her phone buzzed. Victoria Chase, her COO. Andrea, I pulled the file. The Belmont. 14B in the Whitmore portfolio. Lease signed 18 months ago. $28,000 a month. They're 4 months from renewal. What's in Section 9.4? Non-discrimination clause. Mandatory. You wrote it yourself. I remember. What happened? Andrea paused, watched Greg through the glass. He was pouring himself an espresso behind the bar like he'd just won something. Send Raymond. Send Nina. Full compliance review. Andrea, are you sure? We can just full review, Victoria. Today. She hung up. Inside, Greg's morning was getting better by the minute. The restaurant was filling up. Reservations were flowing. He stood at the entrance greeting guests like a man who believed the building existed because of him. A young black man walked in around 9:30. Blazer, pressed slacks, clean shoes. Greg sized him up for a long 3 seconds, then nodded toward a table near the kitchen. The worst seat in the house, next to the dish pit. That's what's available. The man looked at the half-empty dining room. 12 open tables, window seats, garden booths, all empty. What about that's what's available? The man sat. He didn't argue. He'd learned a long time ago that arguing only made it worse. Sophie brought him water. Her hands were shaking. She whispered, I'm sorry. He looked at her. For what? She didn't answer. She couldn't, not without losing her job. Back outside, Andrea saw the whole thing through the window. The young man in the blazer, the table by the dish pit, the 12 empty tables Greg wouldn't offer. She'd spent 20 years building a company that controlled properties in 3 states. She had sat across from governors, pension fund managers, and Fortune 500 CEOs. She had negotiated deals worth more than this entire block. And 15 minutes ago, a man in a rented suit told her she smelled like the street. She didn't feel powerful right now. She felt tired. Tired of being measured by the first thing people saw. Tired of being right about how this would go. Tired of the surprise that never came. Because there was never any surprise. Just the same math, over and over. Different restaurant, different city, Same answer. But tired didn't mean weak, and quiet didn't mean done. 20 minutes later, a black SUV turned the corner onto Fifth Avenue. Then a second one. Then a third. They parked in a row directly in front of the Belmont's entrance. Engines running, tinted windows reflecting the morning sun. Greg noticed them from behind the bar. He set down his espresso. "The hell is that?" Sophie looked through the window. 3 SUVs, 3 doors opening at the same time. A woman in a charcoal blazer stepped out of the first car. Then a man in a dark suit carrying a leather folder. Then a woman with a tablet and a lanyard that read, "Wells Capital Group, Property Compliance." Greg watched them walk toward his front door in a straight line, like a verdict with legs. His espresso went cold. Andrea Wells didn't come from money. She came from the kind of place where money was something that happened to other people. Langston Heights, East Side, a neighborhood where the streetlights worked every other block, and the grocery store closed before the liquor store opened. Andrea grew up in Unit 4C of a public housing complex that smelled like bleach and damp concrete. 2 bedrooms, 1 window that opened, a front door with 3 locks because the hallway never felt safe after dark. Her mother, Denise, worked 2 jobs, mornings at a hospital laundry facility, folding sheets for $12 an hour, evenings at a gas station convenience store behind bulletproof glass. She left the house at 5 a.m. and came home at 11 p.m. Andrea learned to make dinner for herself by the time she was 8, mac and cheese from a box, sometimes just rice with butter and salt. There was no father in the picture. He left when Andrea was 3. No goodbye, no forwarding address, just an empty closet and a child who learned early that people don't always stay. School was the only place that made sense. Andrea read everything she could get her hands on, library books, newspapers left on the bus, the fine print on her mother's bills. Her teachers noticed. One of them, Mrs. Patterson, told her something she never forgot. "Andrea, your mind is the one thing nobody can repossess." She held on to that sentence like a rope thrown into deep water. Scholarship to state. Full ride. She showed up with 2 suitcases and a winter coat her mother bought at Goodwill 3 sizes too big. "You'll grow into it," Denise said. She never did. She kept it anyway. College was a different kind of hard. Not the coursework, she handled that. The hard part was being one of 11 black students in a business program of 400. The hard part was a professor who called on her only when the question was about poverty or crime. The hard part was a classmate who asked, in front of the whole lecture hall, whether she was there on merit or on charity. She graduated summa cum laude, top of her class. She never answered that classmate's question. Her transcript did. Law school came next, then a job at a commercial real estate firm downtown, the only black associate on the floor. She spent 3 years learning how buildings became money, how leases were structured, how zoning laws worked, how a single clause in a contract could protect people or destroy them. At 31, she left. Started Wells Capital Group with a $400,000 loan she spent 2 years qualifying for, a loan her white colleagues got approved in 6 weeks. The first year nearly broke her. She lost 9 pounds, slept in her office 4 nights a week, made calls to investors who wouldn't return them. One landlord told her to her face, "I don't do business with your kind." Nothing personal, but the buildings didn't care what she looked like. The numbers didn't care. The leases didn't care. And Andrea learned that if you know more than everyone in the room, eventually the room has to listen. By 35, Wells Capital managed 12 properties. By 38, 47. By 41, the morning she walked into the Belmont, her portfolio was worth $2.3 billion across 3 states. Office towers, retail plazas, mixed-use developments, 400 employees, a corner office on the 42nd floor of a building she bought outright. The Wall Street Journal ran a profile on her at 39. The headline read, the landlord who rewrote the rules. Bloomberg called her one of the most influential women in commercial real estate. She turned down the interview. She didn't need press. She needed tenants who followed the lease. And every lease, every single one, contained Section 9.4, a non-discrimination clause. Andrea wrote herself after a tenant in Philadelphia refused entry to a black teenager looking for a summer job. The clause was 4 paragraphs long. It covered race, gender, religion, disability, sexual orientation, and national origin. It required staff training, annual compliance checks, documented incident reports, and one final line that Andrea typed at 2 a.m. with tears she'd never admit to. Any tenant found in violation of this section forfeits the rights to renewal and may face immediate lease termination at the sole discretion of Wells Capital Group. She didn't write it for revenge. She wrote it because she remembered Unit 4C. She remembered the gas station. She remembered a classmate asking if she earned her seat. Nobody was going to ask that question in a building she owned. Not ever. Andrea ran every morning, rain or shine, 6 miles through whatever city she was in. She wore the same gray hoodie, the one Denise gave her the Christmas before she passed. Faded, pilling at the cuffs, worth nothing to anyone but Andrea. She ran past her own buildings sometimes and never told a soul. She liked seeing them from the outside, liked knowing that the woman in the hoodie and the name on the lease were the same person, even if nobody else did. Especially if nobody else did. That was the point. You shouldn't have to prove your worth to eat breakfast. You shouldn't have to show your net worth to be treated like a person. Greg Thornton didn't know any of this. He saw a hoodie. He saw brown skin. He saw sweat. And he made his decision in 3 seconds. 3 seconds to judge a woman who had spent 20 years building something he couldn't imagine. 3 seconds that were about to cost him everything. 20 minutes had passed since Andrea left the Belmont. Greg Thornton hadn't thought about her once. He was behind the bar, polishing a wine glass he'd already polished twice. The restaurant was humming. 14 tables filled, 3 more on the wait list. Saturday brunch was Greg's kingdom, and he ruled it the way he believed a man of taste should, with an iron dress code and a flexible conscience. He poured himself a second espresso, took a sip, turned to the bartender, a quiet kid named Ellis who never made eye contact with management. "You see that earlier? The one in the hoodie?" Ellis wiped the counter. "I saw." Unbelievable. They just walk in like they own the place. Greg shook his head with a small, satisfied laugh. No awareness, no class. You'd think they'd at least look in a mirror before showing up somewhere like this. Ellis said nothing. He was black. Greg either didn't notice or didn't care. Probably both. Near the hostess stand, Sophie was seating a couple at table 9. Her hands were still tight around the menus. She'd watched Greg humiliate Andrea. She'd watched him humiliate the young man in the blazer. She'd watched him seat white guests in flip-flops and tank tops with a smile that could melt butter. She wanted to say something. She wanted to scream. But Sophie had $83 in her checking account, and rent was due in 6 days. So she smiled. She seated people. She kept her mouth shut. Greg appeared beside her. "How are we looking, Sophie?" "Full by 10. Waitlist is growing." "Beautiful." He adjusted his cufflinks, left then right, a ritual that happened 9 times a day. This is what happens when you maintain standards. People pay for an experience. They pay to be around a certain kind of person. They don't want to look across the room and see. He gestured vaguely toward the door. You know. Sophie's stomach turned. "Greg, that woman this morning, she said she'd been here before." "So?" "So maybe she's a regular. Maybe she just came from a workout. Maybe she should eat somewhere else." Greg's voice dropped, not angry, worse, bored. like the subject was beneath him. Sophie, I've been in hospitality for 19 years. I know who belongs and who doesn't. Trust me. But the couple you seated right after her, they were dressed the same. Drop it. I'm just saying. I said drop it. His eyes hardened. Unless you'd like to join her outside. I hear the diner down the street is hiring. Sophie went quiet. She turned back to the reservation book. Her eyes burned, but she wouldn't give him the satisfaction. Greg walked back to the dining room. He stopped at table 12, a silver-haired man in a blazer who came every Saturday. Mr. Crawford, the usual? Please, Greg. And tell the chef I want the hollandaise thicker this time. Absolutely, sir. I'll handle it personally. He loved this. The nodding, the yes, sir. The choreography of serving people who looked like him, talked like him, smelled like him. This wasn't just a job for Greg Thornton. It was proof. Proof that the order of things was exactly as it should be. He checked his watch. 10:15. The morning rush was peaking. Life was good. Then Sophie's voice came from the front, thin, tight. Greg? He didn't look up. What? There are people here, at the door. Seat them. I don't think they're here for brunch. Greg looked up. Through the floor-to-ceiling windows, he could see the 3 black SUVs parked in a perfect line along the curb, engines idling, tinted glass catching the morning light. The front door opened. Victoria Chase walked in first, charcoal blazer, black heels clicking on the hardwood. She didn't smile. She didn't look at the menu. She looked at Greg the way a surgeon looks at a tumor, clinical, precise, already planning the cut. Behind her, Raymond Brooks. Dark suit, leather folder under his arm. The folder was thick, the kind of thick that meant someone had been collecting information for a while. Behind Raymond, Nina Castillo, tablet in hand, lanyard around her neck. The lanyard read in clean white letters, Wells Capital Group, Property Compliance. Greg straightened his tie, forced a smile, shifted into performance mode. Good morning. Welcome to the Belmont. Table for 3? Victoria stopped 4 feet from the hostess stand. She didn't sit. She didn't move toward the dining room. She reached into her bag and pulled out a document. 62 pages, spiral-bound, with a yellow tab sticking out from the middle. She placed it on the hostess stand, right on top of Sophie's reservation book. We're not here for brunch, Mr. Thornton. Greg looked at the document, looked at the 3 people standing in front of him like a wall, looked at the SUVs outside. His espresso sat on the bar behind him, getting cold for the 2nd time that morning. I'm sorry. Who are you? Victoria tilted her head. We're from Wells Capital Group. We own the lease on this building. She tapped the yellow tab. And we need to talk about Section 9.4. The color left Greg Thornton's face like water down a drain. Greg stared at the document on the hostess stand. His mouth opened. Nothing came out. Victoria didn't wait for him to recover. Mr. Thornton, your restaurant operates under a commercial lease agreement with Wells Capital Group. That lease was signed 18 months ago. It contains 47 clauses governing the terms of your tenancy. She placed her finger on the yellow tab. Section 9.4 is the one you should be concerned about. I don't understand. What is this about? Raymond Brooks stepped forward. He opened the leather folder. Inside were printed photographs, time-stamped. The first one showed Andrea standing in the foyer of the Belmont. The second showed Greg blocking her path. The third showed the white couple being seated behind her. The fourth showed security gripping Andrea's arm. These were taken 43 minutes ago, Raymond said, by a patron. They've already been shared. Greg's eyes darted between the 3 of them. Shared? Shared where? Online. The video has been up for 22 minutes. Last I checked. Raymond glanced at his phone. 11,000 views. Greg's hand shot to his pocket. He pulled out his phone, typed his own name into the search bar. The first result was a video titled, "Restaurant Manager Refuses to Seat Black Woman, Seats White Couple in Same Clothes." His own face. His own voice. Playing on a screen in front of strangers. The comments were already rolling in. Hundreds. He didn't read them. He didn't need to. He could guess. That's taken out of context. Which context would you like to provide? Victoria asked. Her voice was flat. Professional. The way a blade is flat. It was a dress code issue, that's all. We have standards. I was doing my job. Your job. Victoria picked up the lease document, flipped to the yellow tab, read aloud. No tenant, employee, or agent thereof shall deny service, refuse entry, or otherwise discriminate against any individual on the basis of race, color, national origin, gender, disability, religion, or sexual orientation. That's your lease, Mr. Thornton. Your signature is on page 61. Greg's hand went to his tie. He pulled at the knot like it was choking him. I didn't discriminate against anyone. She wasn't dressed appropriately. That's all this was. Nina stepped forward with her tablet. At 9:47 a.m. this morning, you seated a white male patron wearing cargo shorts, a wrinkled polo shirt, and sandals. At 9:52, you seated a white female patron in yoga pants and a fleece pullover. Neither was asked about a dress code. She scrolled. At 8:16, you refused to seat a black woman in a hoodie and running leggings and told her, she read from the screen, "You smell like the street. You look like the street." You then called security to physically remove her. Silence. The dining room had gone quiet. Forks down, phones out. Every table within earshot had stopped eating and started listening. A man near the window closed his laptop. A woman at the bar set down her mimosa and didn't pick it up again. Greg lowered his voice. Can we discuss this in my office, please? No, Victoria said. We're going to discuss it right here. The same place you discussed that woman's right to exist 40 minutes ago. The front door opened again. Andrea Wells walked in. Gray hoodie, same leggings, same running shoes, hair still pulled back. She looked exactly the same as when Greg had thrown her out. Not one thing had changed about her appearance. The only thing that had changed was the number of people standing behind her. She stood behind Victoria, said nothing, didn't need to. Greg recognized her. His face twitched. The muscle memory of contempt fought with the new reality of fear, and fear won. You're with them? Andrea looked at him with the same calm she'd carried all morning. The calm that comes not from ignorance, but from knowing exactly how much power you hold and choosing, for now, not to use it. I'm not with them, Greg. They work for me. The room shifted. You could feel it. The air pressure changed. The man who had controlled this space for 3 years, who had decided who sat where, who belonged, who didn't, suddenly realized he was standing in someone else's house. Ms. Wells, I had no idea. If I had known. If you had known what? That I was rich? That I owned your building? Andrea took one step forward. Would you have let me sit down then? Greg said nothing. Because that's the problem. You think a hoodie tells you everything you need to know about a person. You think brown skin is a dress code violation. You think a black woman who walks into your restaurant after a run is less human than a white couple in flip-flops. She paused. And you would have kept thinking that, forever, if you hadn't found out I sign your checks. A woman at table 6 put her hand over her mouth. The man beside her stared at his plate. I don't want your apology, Greg. An apology from a man who's only sorry he got caught is worth less than the hoodie you wanted to throw out. Raymond placed a second document on the hostess stand. Mr. Thornton, this is a formal notice of lease compliance review. Wells Capital Group is exercising its right under Section 9.4 to conduct a full audit of your establishment. You'll be contacted within 72 hours regarding next steps. Greg reached for the document with a hand that wasn't steady. This can't... You can't just... I have rights too. I've been running this restaurant for 3 years. I've never had a single complaint. You've never had a single complaint, Victoria repeated. Think about why that might be. The answer hung in the air like smoke. Because the people Greg mistreated never came back. Because they didn't have the power to file a complaint that mattered. Because the system was built so that men like Greg could decide who belonged, and the people he excluded simply disappeared. Until one of them owned the building. Sophie stood behind the hostess stand. She hadn't moved. She hadn't spoken. But tears were running down her face. Not sad tears. Relief. The kind of tears that come when someone finally says the thing you've been choking on for months. Andrea looked at her. Just looked. And nodded once. Sophie nodded back. The dining room of the Belmont had never been this quiet on a Saturday morning. 42 people sat in a room designed for conversation, and not one of them made a sound. The jazz had stopped. Someone had turned it off, or maybe it just felt like it had. The only noise was the low hum of the kitchen exhaust and the distant clink of a dishwasher that hadn't gotten the memo. Greg Thornton stood in the center of his own restaurant like a man who had just realized the floor was made of glass. Victoria Chase hadn't moved from the hostess stand. Raymond Brooks stood to her left, folder open, pen in hand. Nina Castillo's tablet screen glowed with data, timestamps, photographs, compliance metrics, scrolling slowly like a sentence being written in real time. And Andrea Wells stood behind all three of them, still in the gray hoodie, arms at her sides, watching. Greg tried one more time. Ms. Wells, I think there's been a misunderstanding. If you just let me explain. Explain what, Greg? Andrea's voice was steady, not loud. She didn't need volume. That you have a dress code? You do. It's on page 14 of your lease. I've read it. It says smart casual. It doesn't say white. A gasp from somewhere near the window. A nervous cough from the bar. Raymond flipped to a new page in his folder. Mr. Thornton, I want to make sure you understand the scope of what's happening here. Wells Capital Group doesn't just hold the lease on this building. He looked up. We hold the leases on the 3 adjacent properties as well. The parking garage your valet uses, the office building next door where your accountant works, and the retail plaza across the street where your wine distributor operates. Greg's face changed again. Not just pale now, translucent. Like something behind his skin had switched off. So when we say we're conducting a compliance review, Raymond continued, we're not talking about a piece of paper. We're talking about the infrastructure that allows this restaurant to function. Nina stepped forward. I've already flagged 6 items from this morning alone. Discriminatory refusal of service, that's Section 9.4. Failure to maintain a written record of dress code enforcement, Section 12.1. Use of private security to remove a non-threatening patron without documented cause, Section 15.3. She scrolled her tablet. And I haven't even started on the employee interviews yet. She turned to Sophie. Ma'am, were you instructed by Mr. Thornton to pre-screen guests based on appearance? Sophie looked at Greg, then at Nina, then at the floor, then back at Mina. Yes. One word, but it landed like a hammer on stone. And were you instructed to come to him before seating anyone who... Nina paused, choosing her words carefully. Anyone who looked a certain way? Sophie's lip trembled. He said if anyone like that comes in, I should get him first. Like what? Sophie didn't answer. She didn't need to. Everyone in the room knew what "like that" meant. It meant black. It meant brown. It meant anyone Greg decided didn't match the portrait in his head of what a Belmont guest should look like. Greg erupted. That's not what I... Sophie, tell them that's not what I meant. Sophie looked at him. For the first time since she started working at the Belmont, she didn't look away. That's exactly what you meant, Greg. The room exhaled. Someone at table 3 whispered, "Oh my God," into their hand. The front door opened. A man in his early 60s walked in. Gray hair, expensive suit, sweat on his forehead that had nothing to do with the weather. Philip Ashford, owner of the Belmont. Greg's boss. The man who had built the restaurant from a failing bistro into a $2 million a year brunch destination. He'd gotten Nina's call 14 minutes ago and broken 9 traffic laws getting here. Ms. Wells? He extended his hand. Andrea didn't take it. He let it drop. I am so sorry. I just heard. This does not represent who we are as a business. It represents exactly who you are as a business, Andrea said. Because Greg didn't learn this behavior in a vacuum. He learned it here, in this room, on this floor, under your name. Philip turned to Greg. His face was a war between fury and self-preservation. Fury won. You're fired. Greg staggered back half a step. What? You heard me. Get your things. Get out. Now. Philip, you can't. I built this brunch program. I brought in the Saturday crowd. I tripled your weekend revenue. And you did it by deciding which humans deserve to eat here based on the color of their skin. You're done. This is insane. Over what? A hoodie? She walked in looking like what, Greg? Andrea cut in. Her voice was quiet, almost gentle. The way you speak to someone who still doesn't understand. Like what? Greg looked at her. Really looked at her. The hoodie, the leggings, the running shoes. The same outfit he'd sneered at an hour ago. And behind her, 3 people in tailored clothes who followed her orders. A legal team. A compliance team. A machine built to protect the very people he'd tried to erase. He opened his mouth, closed it, opened it again. I didn't know who you were. That's the whole point, Greg. Andrea's voice didn't rise. You shouldn't have to know who someone is to treat them like a person. Philip stepped between them. Give me your keys, building keys, office keys, all of them. Greg stared at him. 3 years. Every Saturday, every holiday, every 14-hour shift. He'd given this restaurant everything. And now a man he'd made rich was throwing him away in front of strangers. He reached into his pocket, pulled out a ring of keys, dropped them on the hostess stand. They landed on top of the lease agreement with a small, final sound. This is wrong, Greg said. His voice cracked. Not from sadness, from something uglier. From the shock of a man who had never been on this side of the door before. You're all overreacting. I enforced a policy, that's it. A woman at table 8 shook her head. You didn't enforce a policy. You enforced your prejudice. And you did it with a smile. Her husband nodded. We've eaten here every Saturday for 2 years. We watched you do this before. We just never said anything. He paused. That's on us. The room stirred. Other patrons looked at each other. The guilt was quiet, but real. They had all been audience to something ugly, and none of them had stood up. Greg grabbed his jacket from the hook behind the bar. Ellis, the bartender he'd made those comments to earlier, was wiping the same spot on the counter he'd been wiping for 20 minutes. He didn't look at Greg. Didn't need to. Greg looked at Sophie one last time. You stabbed me in the back. Sophie straightened. Her voice was clear for the first time all morning. No, Greg, I told the truth. You just never thought anyone would ask. Greg walked out of the Belmont through the same front door he'd pushed Andrea toward an hour earlier. The SUVs were still parked outside. The morning sun was still bright. The world looked exactly the same. But nothing was. The video hit 100,000 views by Sunday morning. By Sunday night, it had crossed 1 million. The title had been rewritten 4 times by different accounts, each version angrier than the last. Manager calls black woman a stray, doesn't know she owns the building. Restaurant refuses service to black CEO, she pulls their lease. He told her to find a dumpster. She owned his entire block. The comments section became a courtroom. Thousands of people weighing in. Some told their own stories. A black surgeon who was asked if he was the janitor at a 5-star hotel in Miami. A Latina attorney who was handed a mop at a networking event because someone assumed she was cleaning staff. An elderly black woman who had been followed around a jewelry store by security 3 times in 1 month. Greg Thornton's name trended on 4 platforms by Monday morning. His LinkedIn profile disappeared by Monday afternoon. His phone went to voicemail. No one returned his calls. Not the restaurants he'd applied to, not the hospitality firms he'd emailed. Not even the diner 2 blocks east, the one he'd told Andrea to visit. A manager there told a reporter, "If he treated a customer like that in front of a camera, imagine what he did when nobody was recording." Greg's landlord called him Tuesday. His apartment building had received complaints from neighbors who recognized him from the video. Someone had taped a printed screenshot of his face to the mailbox in the lobby with the caption, "The Belmont bigot lives here." He took it down. Another one appeared by morning. It wasn't cruelty. It was consequence. The same force Greg had weaponized against others, judgment based on appearance, had turned around and found him. And unlike the people he'd dismissed, Greg couldn't just walk it off, because this time, everyone was watching. Wells Capital Group released a statement on Monday at 9 a.m. It was 4 paragraphs long. No spin, no corporate softness. It read in part, "On Saturday morning, a member of our leadership team was denied service at a property managed under a Wells Capital lease. The refusal was based solely on race. This is a violation of Section 9.4 of the lease agreement, a clause that exists specifically to prevent this kind of harm. Effective immediately, Wells Capital Group is implementing the following measures across our entire portfolio of 214 commercial properties." The measures were specific. Mandatory anti-discrimination training for all customer-facing employees at every tenant business. Annual compliance audits conducted by an independent third party. A confidential reporting hotline for patrons and employees, and a new clause, Section 9.4b, requiring tenants to maintain written records of any service refusal, including the reason, the time, and the identity of the staff member involved. The industry press picked it up within hours. Commercial Real Estate Weekly ran a headline, "Wells Capital rewrites the playbook on tenant accountability." The National Association of Commercial Landlords issued a statement supporting the initiative. 3 competing firms announced they would adopt similar clauses by the end of the quarter. People started calling it the Wells Clause. Andrea did one interview. Just one. Tuesday morning, a local news affiliate. She wore a blazer this time, not because she needed to, but because she knew the camera would notice, and she wanted the contrast to speak for itself. The anchor asked her, "What do you want people to take away from this?" Andrea paused, looked at the camera. "I don't want people to take away that I'm powerful. I want people to take away that power shouldn't matter. I got justice on Saturday because I happened to own the building. But what about the woman who doesn't own anything? What about her?" The clip went viral. 12 million views in 48 hours. It was quoted in classrooms, boardrooms, and city council meetings across the country. Philip Ashford moved fast. He had to. The Belmont was hemorrhaging reservations. 3-star reviews turned into 1-star protests. A group of local activists organized a peaceful demonstration outside the restaurant for the following Saturday. Regulars who had eaten there for years canceled standing reservations with the same email, copied and pasted. "We can't support a business that treats people this way." Philip published a public apology, not on the restaurant's Instagram page, but in the city newspaper, full page. He acknowledged that he had failed to create a culture of inclusion. He acknowledged that Greg's behavior had been enabled by a lack of oversight. He announced a $50,000 donation to the National Urban League and committed to hiring a diversity and inclusion consultant to overhaul the restaurant's policies. He also called Andrea personally. She took the call. "I'm not doing this for publicity," Philip said. "I'm doing it because my daughter is 12 years old, and I don't want her to grow up in a world where this is normal." Andrea listened. She didn't forgive him, but she believed him, and sometimes that's enough to start. Sophie got a call from Victoria Chase on Wednesday afternoon. "Ms. Torres, this is Victoria Chase from Wells Capital Group. We were impressed by your courage on Saturday. We'd like to offer you a position in our tenant relations department, specifically helping us build out the compliance training program for our portfolio." Sophie sat in her car in the parking lot of the Belmont, the job she'd quit that morning, and cried for 11 minutes before she said yes. The young man in the blazer, the one Greg had seated next to the dish pit, saw the video online. He recognized the restaurant, recognized the hostess stand, recognized the table by the kitchen where he'd eaten cold eggs while 12 better seats sat empty. He sent Andrea a message through her company's website. It was 3 sentences long. "I was there that morning. He did the same thing to me. Thank you for being the one who finally said something." Andrea read it at her desk on Thursday evening. She read it twice. Then she closed her laptop and looked out the window at a city full of buildings she owned. Buildings where, because of one Saturday morning, the rules had changed. Not everywhere, not yet, but somewhere. And somewhere was a start. 2 months later, Saturday morning, 6 a.m. Andrea Wells laced up her running shoes in the dark, the same pair, worn at the heels, comfortable in the way only 1,000 miles can make them. She pulled on the gray hoodie, the one with the pilling cuffs, the one Denise gave her the Christmas before she passed. Andrea brought the collar to her nose. It didn't smell like her mother anymore. It smelled like laundry detergent and morning air. But she wore it anyway, every day, because some things aren't about fabric. 6 miles. Same route. Through Riverside Park, past the closed bookshop on 9th, down the hill where the oak trees leaned over the path like they were trying to listen to something. She turned the corner onto 5th and Whitmore. The Belmont sat on the corner the way it always had. Same floor-to-ceiling windows, same white tablecloths, same rosemary bread smell drifting out in the morning. But the sign on the door was new. A small brass plaque mounted at eye level. 5 words engraved in clean serif type. "All are welcome here. Always." Andrea slowed to a walk, read it, kept moving. Inside, the restaurant was already prepping for brunch. A new manager, a woman named Grace Holloway, was adjusting a flower arrangement on the hostess stand. She'd been hired from a nonprofit that specialized in hospitality inclusivity training. Philip Ashford had brought her on 3 weeks after the incident. Sophie wasn't there. She was across town, on the 14th floor of the Wells Capitol building, running her second compliance training session of the week. She'd designed the curriculum herself. It was 62 pages long, the same length as the lease document that had changed her life. She'd named it the Open Door Program. The young man from that Saturday, the one with the blazer and the cold eggs, had filed a formal complaint through the new hotline. His case was documented. His voice was on record. He'd never have to wonder if it mattered. Ellis, the bartender, still worked at the Belmont. He was promoted to floor manager the week after Greg left. On his first day in the new role, he removed the table by the dish pit from the seating chart. He didn't explain why. He didn't need to. And Greg Thornton. Nobody told this part of the story with pleasure. There was no joy in watching a man unravel, but there was something important in understanding that actions have weight, and weight has gravity, and gravity always pulls you down, eventually. Greg moved out of his apartment in August. He left the city. He took a job managing a hotel bar in a small town 3 states away where nobody knew his face. He kept his head down. He didn't give interviews. Whether he learned anything, whether the lesson sank past the shame and into something real, that was between Greg and the mirror. Andrea didn't think about him much. She thought about the plaque on the door. She thought about Sophie's training manual. She thought about every building in her portfolio, 214 of them now, where Section 9.4 was not a suggestion, but a promise. She finished her run at 7:15, stretched on the sidewalk outside her building, looked up at the sky, which was doing that thing it does in early autumn, turning pink and gold at the edges like the day was arriving in formal wear. Her phone buzzed. A text from Victoria. 3 more firms adopted the Wells Clause this week. That's 11 total. Andrea typed back. Good. She didn't type great or amazing or add an exclamation point, because the work wasn't finished. It would never be finished. But every clause signed, every training completed, every door that stayed open when it used to close, that was a brick in a wall she was building between the world as it was and the world as it should be. She pulled the hoodie tighter around her shoulders. Denise's hoodie. And she walked inside. I didn't do this because I own the building, she told a reporter once. I did this because no one should have to own the building to be treated with dignity. What would you have done if you were Andrea? Would you have pulled the lease? Would you have walked away? Or would you have done something nobody saw coming? Drop it in the comments. I want to hear your story. And if this one hit different, if it made you think about the doors that close and the people who open them, share it. Send it to someone who needs to hear it today. Subscribe, because stories like this, they don't tell themselves.
Andrea didn't pull that leaf for revenge. She pulled it because no one showed how to pull the net worth just to eat breakfast. Greg didn't change his behavior when he saw a black woman. He changed it when he found out she was rich. And that's a confession nobody wants to hear. That dignity into many rooms still comes with a price tag. Andrea said it best. What about the woman who doesn't own anything? What about her? See, the hoodie didn't change. The legging didn't change. The only thing that changed was the number of people standing behind her. That means the door was never about red coat. It's what about who gets to decide you belong and whether you can afford to prove them wrong. So here's what I want you to sit with tonight. If respect only show up after power reveals itself, would it ever respect at all? And if the only thing standing between someone and their dignity is a hoodie and the color of their skin, what does that say about the room we all be sitting in? Drop your answer in the comments. And if this story is different, say it. Someone in your life needs to hear today. Subscribe. Story like Andrea don't tell themselves.